Hi, I'm Lila, and when my mother forced me to play at my sister's wedding, she didn't just sideline me in a drab gray dress. She tried to erase my existence to spotlight her golden child. They buried my dreams, hid my talent, but I unleashed a melody so raw, it exposed their lies, and when my father's voice echoed through the speakers, their perfect facade shattered. Stay with me. This is a tale of betrayal and redemption that will leave you breathless. The envelope came on a Tuesday, its gold-embossed seal glinting with false promise. Inside was a wedding invitation. Serena's wedding, my sister, or more accurately, Marion's daughter. It read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Serena Cole and Nathan Brooks. We would love for you to be part of this special day as our piano guest. Tentative." No name, just that label, piano guest, tentative. I stared at it so long the corners started to curl from the heat of my fingers. There wasn't even a formal greeting. "No, dear Leela, no, we hope you'll come." Just an assumption that I'd show up, play something soft, stay quiet, and leave unnoticed. My thumb brushed over the embossed ink, like it could reveal something kinder beneath. It didn't. I folded the card twice, slowly, then pressed it flat again and placed it inside the drawer under my dish towels. The light in my kitchen was warm that afternoon. It was summer in Charleston, and I felt the weight of their expectations suffocating my spirit. I had a lesson to teach at the community center. Later, one of my regular students, Ava, 11, braces, big brown eyes, was waiting when I arrived. As I tuned the upright Yamaha, she bounced on the bench and said, "Miss Cole, I saw your sister in Elegant Bride magazine at Target. She's so pretty." I smiled, the kind that doesn't touch your eyes. "She's getting married soon," I said, adjusting the music stand. "Big wedding." Ava tilted her head. "Will you be in it?" I didn't answer. I handed her the sheet music and asked her to play the scales. But inside something shifted, that familiar itch behind the ribs, when someone says your sister's name like it's dipped in gold, and yours like it's an afterthought, if at all. Serena always belonged to the spotlight. Even as kids, she was the one with matching hair ribbons and piano recitals that ended in standing ovations. I was the quiet one in the corner, clapping too hard, too long, just to feel part of it. After class, I sat in my car a while before heading home. The dashboard clock glowed 7:03 p.m. But I didn't start the engine. I just watched the kids spill out of the center, laughing, backpacks swinging, their joy a stark contrast to my stifled dreams. My phone rang. Marion. "Hi, Mom," I answered, already bracing. "Oh, good," she said. "I was hoping to catch you. We're finalizing things for the wedding." I waited. She continued. "Serena wants it tasteful, elegant, no distractions, so we were thinking maybe you could play something light background music. Nothing dramatic, of course. You're not the star here, Lila. It's not really about the music," she added. "It's about her day, so just something simple, familiar." My hand tightened around the phone. I could feel the corded muscles in my forearm twitch, but my voice came out soft. "Sure, whatever you need." "Great," she chirped. "Oh, and one more thing. Don't worry about dressing up too much. It's more intimate than formal." When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while, able to just sat there, my hand still wrapped around the phone like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this ridiculous performance we all kept pretending was a family. Later that evening, I opened my email to look for rehearsal details. Marion had forwarded the guest list. I scrolled past names I didn't recognize. Chair of Foundation, Dr. Ellen Powell, Aunt Clara, maybe. Then I found it. Lila Cole, piano girl, try not to overdress. I closed the laptop slowly. On my bookshelf, tucked inside a crimson folder from years ago, was an old recital program. I hadn't opened it in years. It was from my senior performance before everything changed. There it was in looping script. Lila Cole, soloist. I traced the letters with my finger. So then I folded the program and slid it into the same drawer as the wedding invitation. Side by side, one said who I was, the other who they thought I was now. She thought she'd dim my light forever. She didn't know I was about to ignite. The package arrived late Wednesday morning. No note, no brand tag, just a plain brown box with my address and Marian's name as the sender. I carried it inside and set it on the small kitchen table, the one I used for sorting bills and lesson plans, and now a battlefield for my resolve. I cut the tape and pulled back the flaps. Inside was a gown, folded in a clear plastic garment bag. Gray, not champagne, not blush, not cream, gray. A shade that screamed forgettable conformity. It had a faded hem and a neckline that dipped oddly off-center, a discarded relic meant to keep me invisible. It smelled faintly like storage. I walked it to the living room and held it up in front of the mirror. It didn't fit the group photo Serena had texted the bridesmaids earlier that week. 7 women standing in a coral gradient, each dress tailored to their bodies, hair curled and shining under golden light. Mine didn't belong in the photo. I grabbed my phone and texted Marian. Me, "Hey, is this the right dress? Mine looks different than the others." Her reply came instantly. "Marian, it's neutral. You'll be at the piano anyway. Nobody cares about you." I stared at those words longer than I should have, not because they surprised me, but because of how easy it still was to be stunned by her. I yearned for her to see me, but her cruelty was my awakening. I packed the dress into my travel garment bag and reminded myself to breathe. I had a rehearsal dinner to get to. By late afternoon, I was walking through the doors of the Harrington house, where the welcome dinner was being held. The main dining hall smelled of garlic and fresh-cut roses. Guests were already filtering in. Friends of the groom, cousins from out of state, some with name tags, others just mingling with polite champagne grins. I spotted my name folded in a tiny card all the way at the end of a long banquet table. My chair was right next to the door leading into the catering kitchen. A waiter offered me water with a quick glance and the kind of nod they give to staff, not guests. A few minutes later, Serena breezed in, glowing in soft silk and perfect foundation. Her hair was curled into effortless waves. She spotted me and walked over with the kind of air kiss that leaves no warmth. "Oh, good, you made it," she said. "I told the planner you'd be here, for the music stuff so they didn't have to adjust seating. You're good with something classical, right?" "Simple. I said you'd be fine with simple." "Don't you dare outshine me," I nodded once, too tightly. "Of course," I said, "simple's my specialty." Before I could sit, Nathan approached. He extended a hand with a politician's smile. "You must be Lila," he said. "Serena told us you were the family pianist." The groom's mother, a tall woman in a burgundy wrap dress, leaned in with interest. "That's sweet," she said, patting my arm. "It's so important to have hired help you can trust at a big event like this." "Hired help?" I opened my mouth, but Marian had already joined the circle. She laughed politely, brushing the comment off like it didn't bruise. "Lila's been playing piano since she was a little girl. She's always been reliable." Reliable? Not talented, not accomplished, just dependable. A cog in their machine, not a sister. I held my breath and smiled. We sat. I picked at the edges of my plate while the rest of the room clinked glasses and laughed like old friends. Occasionally, someone would glance my way, maybe to confirm I hadn't wandered off, but no one asked me anything beyond what I planned to play and whether I'd be wearing something more formal tomorrow. When it was over, I thanked the servers, stepped outside, and walked to my car under the soft glare of streetlights. My shoes clicked against the gravel lot in a rhythm that screamed defiance. Back at the Airbnb, I changed out of the gray dress and laid it flat across the guest bed. The fabric caught the overhead light, dull and lifeless. It looked more like a hotel curtain than a dress. I stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch, but I did. Something in my chest twisted. Not sharp, just deep, a fire waiting to blaze. After a while, I unzipped the front pocket of my suitcase and pulled out the black velvet folder I always brought to performances. Inside were my pieces, Rachmaninoff, Liszt, Chopin, music that used to make me feel like I was more than background. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened to the first page. I wasn't here to take up space, but I wasn't here to disappear either. I told myself it didn't matter. I was here for peace, for family, for them. but the sun had barely climbed past the azalea trees when I realized I'd made a mistake. The wedding ceremony was set outdoors, beneath white drapery and low-hanging string lights that were already flickering softly in the twilight glow. Garden chairs faced a makeshift altar framed with climbing jasmines. Somewhere behind me, a quartet of servers lined up water glasses and repositioned the dessert table under a shaded canopy. I'd arrived early, Marian's orders. She'd wanted me to test the mic, make sure your little piano works with the setup. As if I'd crafted the Kawebe Gran myself, the staff had positioned the piano awkwardly off to the side, tucked between the speaker stack and a catering tent that smelled of lobster and sage. It wasn't near the stage, nor was it angled toward the audience. It was tucked in like a piece of furniture someone didn't know where to place. I ran a hand over the keys and adjusted the bench, my resolve hardening with every touch. I was wearing the gray dress again. This time, I hadn't bothered to smooth out the creases. Marianne's voice rang out behind me, already mic'd up. "Let's run a quick check, shall we? Just a few notes." I nodded and played a soft arpeggio. The speakers caught it late, echoing the sound like it didn't quite belong in the space. I tried again, slower, and Marianne turned toward the crowd, lifting her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. "Perfect," she said. Then she turned back to the gathering guests and smiled into the mic. "Everyone, welcome! What a beautiful day for a celebration." Before we begin, a quick note. Today's ceremony is accompanied by a special touch. Our talented little helper will be providing background music throughout. She's always been content to stay unseen. There was light laughter. A few people clapped, unsure if they were supposed to. I didn't flinch, but I felt the twitch in my hand on the keys. Just a flutter, a spark ready to ignite. I forced a small smile and focused on the black and ivory in front of me. "Keep your head down," I told myself. "It's only music. You've done this 100 times." I waited. The real signal hadn't come yet. Marianne walked off the platform and a few bridesmaids passed by, adjusting their hair, taking selfies, complimenting each other's lashes. One glanced over at me and said, "Cute ensemble," in the way someone might say, "Nice coaster," when it's unused. Then Serena approached, floating down the aisle like the day belonged to her alone. She looked breathtaking, of course, her gown sculpted to her figure like poured silk. She had always known how to catch the light. She leaned in close, lips almost brushing my ear. Her perfume smelled like orchid and arrogance. "Play this, won't you?" she whispered, sliding a folded sheet of music onto the stand. "I wrote it just for today. It's called Dreams of a Flawless Moment. Simple and soft, just like you used to play when we were little." "Don't dare make this about you." I blinked down at the handwritten notes. It was basic, predictable chord progressions, a melody that tiptoed instead of dancing. It wasn't just amateur, it was childish. And she wanted me to play it in front of all these people. The past tugged at me like a thread unraveling. I was 16 again, sitting under hot stage lights at a regional competition, my fingers flying through Chopin's Ballade in G minor. Marianne sat in the 4th row, hands folded tightly in her lap. Serena had been near the back wearing a floral dress and an impatient frown. Afterward, she hadn't clapped. That same night she cried in the car. I remember the whimper. "You always make it about you." Marianne had turned around and snapped. "What else can you let her shine?" That was the moment something cracked. The piano had once felt like breath and fire in my bones. After that night, it felt like guilt, like vanity, like something I should hide. I looked at the sheet again, simple and soft, of course, so I stay forgettable. The guests began to shift. The procession was about to start. I adjusted the music on the stand. My fingers hovered over the keys and I played. The melody tiptoed across the garden like a child unsure of its place. It said nothing. It filled space. It echoed softly, then vanished before anyone could remember it was there. The applause from the ceremony still echoed faintly across the lawn when I slipped away from the noise. I didn't go far, just beyond the flickering string lights, through the narrow stone path that curved behind the reception tent. The azaleas thinned out, and I found myself standing before the rose bushes near the fence line. And that's where she was, Grandma Evelyn, half sunk into a white wicker chair, her cardigan draped loosely over her shoulders. She was humming softly, a melody that carried my lost dreams. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound until I heard it again in the dark. She turned her head before I spoke, like she'd already known I was coming. "There you are," she said. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but it still carried the same warmth that had soothed me through every skinned knee and disappointment. "You looked lovely out there, even if they tried to hide you." I sat down on the small bench across from her. The silence between us felt like a blanket. Familiar, safe. She reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed something into my palm. A folded envelope yellowed at the edges. "Your father meant to give you this," she whispered. "They never sent it." I looked down. No return address, just my name in his old handwriting. The seal was already broken. I opened it slowly, like it might shatter in the air. Inside was a letter from Curtis Institute. A full scholarship, summer intensive, then fall admission, dated 12 years ago. I forgot how to breathe. I read it again, slower this time, my eyes catching the line about exceptional promise and rare control of tone. I remembered that audition, remembered coming home, my fingers aching from the Rachmaninoff cadenza, my chest still heaving from nerves. That night, Marian had walked into my room and said, "They weren't interested. Too many better candidates this year." And just like that, I'd believed her. Swallowed it whole, my throat clenched. Grandma Evelyn didn't speak. She just watched me, her eyes damp but steady. I knew then she'd known. Maybe not everything, but enough. The rest of the puzzle fit too easily. A week later, Marian had stood beside Serena at that stupid ribbon cutting for the Youth Symphony Alliance, a music nonprofit Serena founded with backing from the same foundation that partnered with Curtis. I remembered the article in the paper. I remembered how Marian kept calling Serena visionary. I remembered shrinking. My dream had never failed me. It had been buried. I sat there, hunched forward, the letter still in my lap. My fingers had curled slightly, but I hadn't realized until I noticed the faint crease I'd made in the paper. I smoothed it gently, then folded it again, this time on my terms. Their betrayal fueled my resolve. Grandma Evelyn reached over, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You weren't weak," she said. "They feared your brilliance." I nodded but didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could yet. Later, when I returned to the reception hall, my heels clicked too loud against the hardwood floor. The lights inside had dimmed for the slideshow. Everyone faced the projector screen, a canvas of their curated lies. The title card read, "Our Journey, Serena and Family." I stood near the back. The first slide showed Serena at 5 in a tutu. The next blowing out candles on her 7th birthday. Then came recital, Serena holding a tiny violin. Then posing with a local choir. There were beach photos. Christmas dinner. A blurry video clip of Marian adjusting Serena's sash at a middle school awards night. I waited. The loop continued. There were no pictures of me, not even in the background. No Halloween costumes, no piano trophies, not even the group shot at the beach house where I knew for a fact I'd been the one behind the camera. The audience clapped politely at the end. Marian stood and lifted a champagne glass glowing under the amber lights. "To my beautiful daughter," she said, "every moment with you has been a joy to relive." I didn't lift my glass. I didn't even blink. My eyes stayed fixed on the blank screen, now white again, a void where my existence was erased. They hadn't just rewritten the story. They had made sure I didn't exist in it. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't walk out. But inside something shifted. A weight I'd carried for years, the need to be quiet, to not ruin the peace, started to slide off inch by inch. I'd make them see me. The air was still cool when I arrived at the hotel, the kind of heavy quiet that only happens early in the morning before weddings. I walked through the valet lot, clutching my folder of sheet music and adjusting the hem of that gray dress, a shackle of their design, still not quite mine. I approached the main doors with the printed confirmation in hand, expecting a nod and a welcome. Instead, I was stopped. A hotel coordinator, clipboard in one hand, headset clipped to her ear, held up her palm. "Hi, vendors are checking in around the back," she said without looking up. "I'm not with catering," I said. "I'm the bride's sister." She blinked, pausing for the first time. "Oh," she said slowly, flipping pages. "Sorry, you weren't listed in the family section. We had you with music services." I stood still, hearing the words echo in the atrium's glass walls. She waved someone over with a strained smile. "It's fine, just let her through." I was led around the side entrance anyway, through the service hallway, past a man carrying stacked linens, a teenager unboxing plastic champagne flutes. When I emerged into the prep area of the ballroom, I had the strange sense I had never left backstage. Later, I made my way into the adjoining breakfast room for the family welcome meal. Marian had organized a small formal affair, her version of Southern charm, which meant assigned seating and monogrammed cloth napkins. The tables were set in a wide U-shape. I found my name not next to Serena, not between any cousins, not even in the cluster labeled family, just one small card at the edge set slightly askew, Miss Lila Cole, piano accompanist. I stood there longer than I should have. A staff member breezed by, adjusted a centerpiece, glanced at me like I was in her way. I sat down quietly. From across the room, I watched the rest of them filter in. One cousin in a matching emerald wrap dress, another bridesmaid squealed over mimosas. Then came Marian, gliding in with the familiarity of someone completely in control of the scene. Serena entered last. Of course, hair swept into a shiny bun, a queen in their scripted play. When she stepped into the room, people actually clapped. Marian walked to her, kissed her cheek. Then she turned to me with a practiced smile. "Try not to play too loud during the vows," she said under her breath, adjusting the neckline of Serena's dress. "It's Serena's moment. Don't ruin it." I nodded but didn't respond because if I had spoken, it would have come out as a scream. Instead, I stood and excused myself, said something vague about needing to tune the piano. No one really noticed. Out in the hallway, I leaned against the cold marble wall and pulled my phone from my clutch. I opened my draft folder. There it was, just as I'd left it. Subject: Resignation, Community Arts Program. I had written the draft months ago, assuming that after this wedding, after keeping my head down one last time, I'd be free. I'd walk away from teaching, from music, from the last tether that kept me hoping for something that never came. But now, I wasn't so sure. I stared at the blinking cursor. My finger hovered over delete, then hovered over send. Then I locked the screen. I reached into my bag for tissues. Instead, my fingers closed around something firmer, thicker. The Curtis letter. I had placed it there before leaving the Airbnb, folded carefully beside my lipstick and metronome keychain. I slid it out. My thumb ran over the crease I'd made last night. Full academic award, room and board. 5 words that had once meant everything, then meant nothing, and now meant something different altogether. I could have gone. I should have gone. But I didn't. And the thing is, it wasn't because I wasn't ready. It was because someone made that choice for me and called it love. A few deep breaths, a vow to reclaim my voice, then I folded the letter and slipped it back in. When I returned to the breakfast room, the plates were mostly cleared. People laughed. Someone had started a toast. Serena beamed. I walked back to my seat without a word. But before sitting, I unlatched the leather folder of sheet music I'd carried all morning. Tucked behind the requested selections was my own copy, handwritten, edited, bolded notes, swells I had mapped with pencil years ago. I switched it out. No one saw, no one asked, but they would hear. By the time guests began to settle into their white folding chairs beneath the azalea canopy, the air had turned thick with anticipation and sweat. I stood alone near the piano, half in shadow, half in glare from the low sun filtering through the draped linen canopy above. My dress, still gray, still quietly offensive, blended perfectly into the background linen, as if I'd been meant to disappear. I could hear the distant chatter of cousins and neighbors, waiters moving trays of champagne, and beyond the gauzy curtain at the garden's edge, Serena's voice, laughing, delicate, practiced. I glanced down at the keyboard and rested my hands above the keys. My fingers hovered, not touching, just breathing there. They'd told me exactly what to play. Dreams of a flawless moment. A piece that wasn't written for music, but for optics, light, frothy, forgettable, just the right soundtrack to make the bride look radiant without drawing attention anywhere else. But as the first note approached, I didn't reach for Serena's sheet music. Instead, I reached for my own, tucked between the pages like it had always been there. I placed the sheet gently onto the stand. Then I began. The first note came slow, heavier than I'd intended, almost unsure. But then the second found it, and the third reached deeper. It was a melody I hadn't played aloud in 12 years. I'd written it during those lost afternoons in high school, when the world felt like too much, and yet nowhere near enough. I played it to soothe myself when the rejection letters came in, not knowing they'd never been sent. The chords were dark, then rising, minor turns that flirted with hope. There was no bright resolution, just a truth I'd carried in secret for too long. The guests shifted in their chairs. A few whispered. Someone cleared their throat, but no one interrupted, and I didn't stop. A hush settled like a soft blanket over the crowd. Even the servers had paused at the tent's edge. Then, halfway through the piece, just as I lifted into the bridge, the speakers crackled. A man's voice filled the garden, not a stranger's, my father's. To my daughter Lila, the one who taught herself to fly, even when we clipped her wings. A collective intake of breath spread across the lawn. Several heads turned, including the minister. The voice continued, slow and worn with emotion. I recorded this the day Curtis called. I wish I could have protected that dream longer. I wish I'd fought harder. I froze, hands suspended above the keys. The last time I heard that voice was at his funeral. The recording played on. Not long, but long enough to slice open every room I'd been locked out of, enough to say what no one else had dared. Gasps turned to silence. Serena, framed perfectly at the start of the aisle, clutching her bouquet like it might break, stood motionless beneath the floral arch. Marion's gaze burned with a fury she couldn't unleash. I closed my eyes and let the final notes fall gently from my hands. They didn't land in applause. They landed in silence, the kind of silence that swells in your chest, that makes people look at each other differently. For a second, no one moved. I looked up. Not even the wind dared, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt undeniable. The final chord still lingered in the air, suspended between the branches of the azalea trees and the silence that swallowed the courtyard whole. No one moved. No one dared. Serena remained frozen beneath the floral archway, bouquet wilting slightly in her grip. Marion hadn't spoken, but her eyes darted as if seeking an escape from her own deception. Then came the sound of a chair gently creaking. It was Victor Lane. He had once been my conductor years ago, when I still believed talent could rise above politics, now older, heavier, but no less sharp in presence. He stood from the third row and stepped forward with the deliberate grace only a man used to commanding a stage could possess. In his hand was a folded paper. A relic of my stolen future. I wasn't sure if this would ever leave my briefcase, he began, voice calm but steady. 12 years ago, I signed this letter on Curtis's letterhead, a full scholarship for Lila Cole. Gasps rippled across the crowd like a storm breaking free. He raised the page, facing the guests like a conductor raising his baton. Her acceptance was confirmed, her attendance blocked. I didn't breathe, my fingers curled beneath the edge of the piano bench. Marion's complexion paled, she clutched her seat as if the truth might topple her. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. Nothing came out. But Serena stepped forward, shaking her head with forced lightness. That letter, it was never mailed. You can't prove she was worthy of that stage. Victor turned to her, expression unreadable. It wasn't mailed because someone in her family requested the foundation redirect the funds. That I do have in writing." A murmur erupted. Not confusion this time, but realization. A few guests turned toward Marian, some toward Serena. A couple stood from their seats entirely, drawn to the unraveling truth. I didn't move. I didn't need to. A small voice, barely audible, cut through the growing buzz. "She taught me." Everyone turned. It was Nia, 11, in braces and ballet flats, one of my piano students from the community center. She stepped forward, twisting a wrinkled tissue between her fingers. "She taught me what it means to believe in your sound, even when no one else hears it." Her voice cracked and she blinked hard. I used to whisper in everything. Even when I played, she told me that silence doesn't make you safe. It just makes you easier to ignore. Her last words came out as a whisper, but they struck louder than any mic'd speech that day. Nia looked toward me, eyes glassy but proud. Then she turned and walked back to her seat. There was no applause, no music, just shifting silence. A woman from the groom's side, his aunt I later learned, said just loud enough for others to hear, "She's the only reason I didn't leave after the second toast." Another man near her nodded. "Same." I still hadn't stood. My hands rested neatly on my lap. My gaze remained steady. Marian looked like she might speak, might shout, but no one handed her a microphone. For once, there was no sudden favor, no rescue moment where she could reclaim control. And Serena. She reached for the mic stand behind the floral pedestal, but her hand met nothing. The microphone was gone. Someone had taken it before she got there. I didn't smile, not because I didn't feel something rise within me, but because it wasn't joy. It was something else, something quieter, older, the sound of a truth finally being heard. Serena's fingers hovered in the air, a desperate grasp for control. The microphone had vanished, like someone had quietly decided she'd spoken enough for one lifetime. She cleared her throat, forced a brittle smile, and raised her voice without the amplifier. "Let's not get lost in theatrics," she began, her tone pitched higher than usual. A crumbling facade of composure. "This is my day, not hers." "I understand emotions are running high," she said, hand dramatically resting on her chest. "But I think we can all agree that forged letters and staged confessions don't belong at a wedding." She paused, expecting some polite agreement. There was none. Still, she pressed forward. "I have documentation here that confirms Lila's application was rejected. I didn't want to share this, but given what's happened," she turned, gesturing to a man in a dark suit who handed her a printed paper from a slim leather folder. She held it up like proof in a courtroom. Curtis said no. "So while I'm sure the story was heartfelt, it wasn't real. And I'm sorry, but we can't keep letting a piano player hijack an entire wedding." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. But I felt every stare shift between us like a ripple across a pond. For a moment, the crowd was still, uncertain, testing her tone, weighing her confidence. The lie was dressed up, delivered clean and rehearsed. I recognized the trick. She was trying to rewrite the narrative quickly while the emotions were still raw. Marian gave her a slight, steady nod from her seat, a silent command to keep lying, and for one split second I saw it working. Then a voice interrupted from the side aisle. "I don't care who said what," the man said, standing tall in a crisp navy jacket. "Her music spoke the truth." A murmur ran through the guests. Someone clapped, another followed, then a third, and none of it was for Serena. She tried to speak again, but her words were buried under a tide of rising applause. The spotlight, once fixed squarely on the aisle, now turned almost hesitantly back toward the grand piano. I stood, the gray fabric of my dress brushing past my calves, and walked toward the bench. There was no speech, no declaration. I simply sat. Someone had placed my music folder on the stand, but inside I slid in a different page, one I had handwritten years ago, a piece I never finished until last night. The melody began low, a single line, then another joined it, and then came the thread that stitched them together, the lullaby my grandmother used to hum. The one I heard beside the roses, the notes weren't sweet, they were resolute. The chords didn't cry. It confessed, and as the music climbed, winding through every omission, every unspoken insult, Every moment I was told to sit down and smile, I felt my chest open, not with grief, with clarity. People leaned forward, some stood. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a staff member approach the front. In his hand, crumpled but intact, was the original wedding invitation. The one that read, "Piano Girl, tentative." He placed it gently beside the bench. Someone had scribbled over it in blue pen, 4 words, small but sure, the one they buried. But someone else had crossed that out too, and beneath it in bolder strokes, the one who set us free. I kept playing. I didn't look up. Not even when I heard someone crying in the 4th row. Not even when Serena turned her back to the crowd. And not even when Marian slowly, silently rose from her seat and slipped out the side garden gate. The piece ended not in triumph, but in stillness, like a lake after a storm. No cue was needed. The applause roared, sudden and full, not rushed, not polite. It echoed across the courtyard, across the trees, across 12 years of silence, and it did not stop. The wind had picked up slightly by the time the last guests filtered out of the garden courtyard. Petals that had been meticulously scattered for the ceremony now floated unevenly across the brick walkway. Champagne flutes stood half full, bearing the stains of their guilt, forgotten. A string quartet quietly packed up without fanfare. The applause had long faded, but its echo lingered. I stayed seated with my grandmother on the terrace of the hotel. She had brought us 2 cups of tea. Hers was steeped strong and dark, mine lighter, a quiet nod to our shared strength. She leaned slightly forward in her chair, her fingers folded around the envelope, like she was tucking a memory back into place. "The world didn't get it wrong, darling," she said, her voice low but steady. "They couldn't silence your soul." I didn't say anything. I just watched her fold the Curtis letter carefully, a testament to my stolen dreams. Below us, Marian walked past. She didn't stop, didn't pause, just walked, heels clipped, shoulders tight, a defeated shadow of her former control. She didn't look up at me. And for the first time in years, I didn't look down. Serena stood at the edge of the steps near one of the azalea trees. She held her bouquet like an afterthought. Not a single guest had followed her, not even the wedding planner. She caught my eye. There was a moment, fleeting as a dying ember, where her chin lifted slightly, as if waiting for me to come over. Say something, maybe offer her a graceful exit? I didn't. She blinked first, and I stayed seated beside my grandmother. Later that evening, as the cleanup crew folded chairs and rolled away cables, I heard someone speaking near the exit. It was a man in a dark jacket, one of the donors who had spoken to Victor earlier. I caught only fragments: misleading representation, ethical concern, board review. They were talking about Serena's music foundation. Marian's name came up, then disappeared just as quickly. Not shouted, just noted, a whisper of their downfall. Inside, someone was updating the event program on the venue's website. I watched through the open glass doors as the line beneath musical guest changed, no longer background accompaniment, now feature performance. Lila Cole, original composition. I didn't smile, but I did breathe. A staff member approached from the side garden. It was the same one who'd handed me the crumpled invitation earlier. He held it again, now even more creased than before. "Someone left this near the piano," he said. "Thought you might want it." I opened it gently. The words "Piano Girl Tentative" were still there, but scribbled out now, covered in block letters on the back, black pen pressed deep into the fibers. "Thank you for awakening us." Months later, I pinned that note to my corkboard in the office at the community center. Just beneath it, I unfolded an old recital program, the one from my teenage years, the one I hadn't looked at in more than a decade. My name was still there, written in swirled script: Lila Cole, soloist. I didn't cry, but I let it stay unfolded. It was a Friday when I met her. My new student, 13 years old, elbows too pointy for the bench, sneakers too loud for the carpet. She barely spoke, but she never broke eye contact when she sat down. I asked her if she wanted to learn scales. She shook her head. "They say I'm too quiet to matter," she mumbled. "Too invisible to be heard." I looked at her and saw my younger self, silenced but unbroken. So I smiled and said, then play something they can't ignore. She looked down at the keys and I looked ahead. Not because I wanted the spotlight, I just wanted them to hear me. My truth resounded, but the cost was a family lost. I carry their absence like a quiet ache, rebuilding my voice note by note, knowing some scars sing louder than silence.